Sandra here from Create in Spain, and today I wanted to introduce you to Gunther. Gunther is a dog that I doodled. I think he must be a Vizsla or something. He looks like that to me. He's a bit of a fun creature, but he's here to be a demonstration on a technique that you may or may not realise is quite important in shortcuts a lot. Now, most people who make cards like to use various drawings, clip art and so on and so forth, and tend to import it. Now I tend to draw my own and import things. Occasionally I use clip art out of my vast, extensive clip art collection that I've had for many years and I'm loath to part with. But quite often I do actually draw my own, and those who know me already will realise that I frequently either draw on paper and scan in, or alternatively, and this does tend to be my preferred method, actually draw on my iPad and import. Now, one of the apps that I've taken to using recently is called Concepts. It is not a free app, but it's pretty cheap for the powerful nature of the app itself. And I have found that I enjoy using it. There are some little quirks to it, in that it is not the type of drawing app that you're probably used to. It is completely and utterly different. If you want to have a look at it, go to the Concepts page and have a look at their videos and demonstrations. I did a video, I think I've done 2 videos on Concepts. I did a video when it first came out and I got my hands on it, and I found it extremely difficult to use in that I wasn't used to things like finger swipes and stretching 2 fingers apart or pulling them together to resize things and tapping, holding, all this sort of stuff, because I tended not to do that with my iPad in the first place. So it has taken me a while to get used to it. It's been improved over the last few months, and apart from the fact that I'm having a couple of stylus issues with my new iPad at the moment, it's been very good, and I'm starting to get a bit more used to it. So I do tend to like it for doodling, and quite often I'll sit in the lounge having a cup of coffee or something, and I'll have my iPad with me and I'll just doodle things. And sometimes doodles turn into things that I actually want to keep, sometimes they don't. The great thing about doing it on an iPad is you're not going through reams of paper doing it. So anyway, Gunther here is one of my doodles, and as it happens, I exported Gunther, and the way I do it for my ease of use is I send it to myself via an email and then I open it up and save it. I prefer doing it that way. There are other ways of saving them, but that's the way I tend to do it. So I saved it. Now in Concepts I have a range of things that I can save to. I can save to JPEG, I can save to PNG, I can save to SVG, I can save to PNG. Quite a list. And I thought it'd be useful to show you how to use the different formats that can be saved. And they are formats which are common to the graphics industry. So you may well come across something that you want, and maybe it's not in a format that you're particularly familiar with, and this might help you out a bit. It's also related to a video that I do intend to do shortly on elevated pop-up cards, because these sorts of things quite frequently use a lot of graphics. I thought it'd be handy to show you how to manipulate the graphics that you might have. So we're going to start off here with Gunther, and this particular one was a JPEG. And so all I did was go to the trace and let it do its own thing. And if I click on Gunther here and give you a preview, this is what the trace has ended up as. Okay. Now, you'll notice here that there are some lines that I wouldn't want to cut. I definitely don't want to cut his head off, so that wouldn't be a good idea. Now, there are various things that I could do to manipulate this image so that I could just cut out the outside line. If I wanted to do a print and cut, I still don't want to cut this bit. I could use the eraser, for example. Easy enough to do, and it would be pretty quick in this particular instance. Sometimes not quite so quick. Sometimes you've traced something and you think, I wish I'd actually put a blackout on that, and you hadn't, and you can't be bothered to retrace it, etc., etc. So here is Gunther again with, if I go to view outlines only, exactly the same trace. Now if I put him back to show Gunther, right. So assuming I want to cut around him and not cut his head off, there is another way around this. When you go to your cut menu, select your cut. Now, if you're anything like me, up until recently, I sort of ignored this box, but it's actually quite useful. Because if you look at this, it has the shadow menu in it. So you've got a shadow, a rounded shadow, a straight shadow. You have a blackout. So if I click on blackout, what do we get then? Show outlines only. That didn't seem to do much, did it? Okay, let's put him back. If I go to the shadow blackout, you can see that an outline pops up around the edge. And if I go to the outlines only, you can see that it has got a nice clean edge, and I don't have to worry about this anymore, which is quite handy. Now you can alter the size of the blackout, and you can alter the mitre of the corners. And if you have more than one object, you can weld them together. Now I mention weld because it's quite useful in that if you have several shapes on your design, but you don't want to permanently join them up. You don't want to do a path and union. You can temporarily weld them by clicking on the weld. So your overlapping shapes will actually cut around the outline. Now the beauty of this, and you may or may not have thought of this already, but the beauty is if you have several different designs and you want to apply different cuts to them, different blackouts and all the rest of it, but you don't want to faff around doing it for each individual design. Save it if it's one you're going to use time and time again, and then think, okay, I've got to take that blackout off, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. It's quite handy from the point of view if this is a temporary thing, this is done under the cut menu. So it's for this particular cut and it doesn't alter your base design. So that's a very useful thing to realise. Now, what happens if you import an SVG? If you draw in an SVG, come to that. Now, Concepts is one of the apps that does actually draw using vectors, i.e. the same thing that Shortcut Slot uses is used by Concepts. And I have to say, several other apps, quite a few other apps, will draw in an SVG or allow you to export to an SVG format because they are vector drawing packages. Okay, so it's not the only one, but it just happens to be the one I'm using. Now, what happens if you're familiar with drawing on a design package? You can generally choose your line width, so you can have very fine lines like this, or you can have thicker lines that are done like that. And what will happen if you export to an SVG is it will take the median of the line. So the middle path, if you like, in general, is the one that will be taken. It is in most apps, it's generally the middle. So you might have drawn something that had, I don't know, for an extreme example, 0.5 centimetre line, And then when you import it, it comes in as a wire drawing and you think, huh, what? But that is what it's supposed to do, and it does it very nicely. But it does have its benefits. This drawing here is the same drawing, and all I did with this, I did it with a much thicker line on my iPad, and then I exported it as a PNG. And because I did that, I could put it through the trace and get the double line. So my thickness of line is actually here. Now there is another way of doing this. Oh, he looks quite cute, doesn't he? Ah, I might do that again sometime. Okay, there is another way of doing this, and that is to select this one and go to, let me see, where is it? Path, offset path. And you should be able to then choose your type of offset, make it narrower if you so wish, or make it wider if you so wish, and get the result that you actually want. Okay, so we have the offset, and excuse me, get a bit dry throat here. If I zoom in, you can see that the lines are now thicker. So that's one way of doing it. And if I zoom back out, go to my view, fit to window. But if I don't, again, if I don't want to mess around with my actual image, I just want to do it for this particular cut or this particular draw, because you can set this to a draw line and it will do the same thing, which I can demonstrate. Draw pen. And then if I put the, let me see, shadow, normal shadow, shadow rounded. There we go, we get another thicker line. And you would have to, if you're going to do that as a proper item, you would have to make sure, because it wasn't drawn like that, you'd have to make sure that you did a union on that for it to actually work. So perhaps not the best demonstration of that particular one. But you get the gist of it. You can put your shadow on in the cut menu. You don't have to do it before. Okay, let's take him back. Whoops. And undo. There we go. Going back to Gunther now. Okay, now the next one, DXF. Now this image was exported as a, I think this particular bit was a PNG. And as you can see, I have the lines which were drawn in an SVG form, in a vector format I should say, and therefore they are cut lines already. However, what I did after that was I used an airbrush effect on it. So I have my image in a PNG format, or it could be JPEG, it makes very little difference. This is what I would get if I exported it as a DXF. Not a good look. I like my bear, but I don't really like this version. And you can see, particularly if I zoom in, there we go, that he has all the various lines that I did when I was airbrushing him. So that wouldn't be a very good choice for a cut file. Okay for making the actual image, and you could save the image with your trace, but the actual DXF itself, no, wouldn't work too well. Okay, so go back to fit to window. And then I have my PNG. Now, the advantage with colouring things in using airbrushes or whatever electronically, and then having your image imported, is that it makes no difference that you have for example, airbrush these bits outside, because the only bit it's going to cut out is the bit that has actually got the line on it. And the only bit, if you export something like that, the only bit that is going to be exported as a vector are these solid lines that you drew in the first place before you started doing your colouring in. So basically, I could still cut that flower out if I go to the view, show the outlines only. I've already done my shadow bits there. My outlines are in place, they're fine, not a problem. And if I actually did a print and cut on that, I would be cutting out the dog, coloured in, the flower coloured in, and the various bits around it that I'm not interested in anyway. But that's how it works. And so the easiest thing is in the world to actually draw in a vector format in the first place. If you have a tablet, it does make life easier, because those lines, unlike if I, for example, get out a sheet of paper and a marker, my lines, even though they look correct to me, my lines will have wobble in them. They will vary in depth of colour. So when I do a trace, I won't necessarily get an easy trace from it. But if you draw in an SVG format or a vector format, I keep saying SVG, but if you draw in the vector format on your iPad or your tablet or whatever, then those outlines that you are drawing will be much, much easier to trace. And as I said, you can do whatever colouring in you like on them, but you'll have the basic cut lines to work with. Okay, I hope you found that useful, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care now. Bye.